Good evening, guys. Happy Monday. Hopefully, you guys are staying warm across the area. So, this video is going to be more of a post event breakdown, kind of what went right, what went wrong. If at any point you guys have questions, please feel free to comment them on whatever social platform you're viewing this on, and I will gladly answer them. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, kind of why do I do this breakdown of it, and why do I necessarily expose, why my forecasts weren't right, how bad the forecasts were, etc., stuff like that. So, first off, it gives me a better understanding of, what actually is happening and stuff like that. Because, a lot of times you can just go and, just write off the event, cool, you're done, move on to the next. That is not necessarily how I want to do my weather, and I don't think that's how anyone should do weather, but that's how it is, especially in the broadcast side. It's important to go back in after the event and understand what's happening, kind of what went right, what went wrong per se, and kind of figure out what you can do to improve the next time. And I know that's hit like 3 points on this slide at the same time, but I do find that's very important to be able to actually understand what the weather's doing rather than just putting together a forecast for it. So, another thing that I like to do is kind of find and locate biases in the forecast data. This one kind of is kind of a bigger one in this sense, just due to how some of the data worked out. So, I'll kind of get into that here in a little bit. And then, have transparency with the people that I work with in terms of, passing on forecast data, what's doing, etc., stuff like that, along with those of you that follow WoolawayWx on, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever platform you're on, and be able to have, that true facing towards you guys of, like, okay, this is kind of what's happened, this is what it went awry, rather than, just putting out a forecast graphic, it being wrong by 3 to 4 inches, and, not even caring. So I just want to be able to have that transparency with you guys. I feel like, that might not necessarily be, the best PR in terms of, okay, this is the forecast, I'm going to stick to it, not look back. But, in my sense, I feel like it's a lot better, because it gives me more of a personal sense tied to the forecast, especially since like I create them rather than just putting it on a map like a lot of, broadcast does and such or stuff like that. So, I think that's, something that, I want to do here on my page. If you guys don't like people going over wrong forecasts, then I guess this isn't the page for you. But hopefully, most of you guys kind of understand, kind of the goal that I'm going with this. So this is the first forecast that we put out. It was, I believe, this is Wednesday night, the 21st at 7:30. So this was kind of one of those forecasts that I was like, I don't know about doing it so early. And believe it or not, I personally think this is probably one of the better ones. So kind of breaking down kind of what I did here. So on the left, you have, the graphic I put out on social media. You can still go find these. They're still up. They're available. I don't remove them if they're wrong, etc., stuff like that. So they're there if you want to go in, and actually look, at making sure that, that's what he actually put out. On the right-hand side, I took that forecast and tried to make a shapefile out of it and then overlaid it in a GIS program to kind of show you guys what the actual like alerts or the forecasts were and the snowfall reports. So down here, of course, you can see, the legend for the snowfall reports. These will be the same across all 4 forecasts, I believe. They'll be the colored coding. They don't necessarily match the colors I used on the graphics. So just because it's pink doesn't mean that it should all be pink, etc., stuff like that. So the first forecast, like I said, I think it was personally one of my better ones I did for this event. We're most of this pink area, 6 to 10 inches kind of matches over here. And a lot of these were, had a lot of 8 to 10 inch reports. Had some 6 to 8 inches across the area. Down here didn't really go over very well with 8 to 12, but that's kind of what it is. Had some issues with ice down that direction, so it kind of affected the forecast. But for the immediate area that I actually cover, I don't, like I said, I think this is probably the best forecast that I have put out for this event. So, um, and do note how all over the place these snowfall reports are. It is very, very hard to truly get an understanding of exactly, you know, what the snowfall was whenever you have, all sorts of different measurements all in one area. Like up here at Springfield, we've got, you know, there's a 6 to 8 inch disc behind the 4 to 6 inch disc, etc. Stuff like that. So, there's a lot of variance in these reports, and that shows there's also a lot of variance in the system as well. So, yeah, there's forecast number one. Forecast number two, this was whenever the data really started showing, that the heavier band of snow was going to start shifting north. Hence the, movement of the red up to more of the area that I actually cover. Um, the 9 to 12 inch range, backing off the southern part of it to 7 to 10 inches. This one wasn't too bad. I think 12 inches was a little too much. Um, but I think, believe it or not, I really think that, the first and second forecast was actually some of the better forecasts, which shouldn't be that way, but it really is. And I'll kind of get into that kind of here in a little bit of why that I think that is. So, but yeah, I didn't include any ice reports in this. That was just being too messy to try to understand. That's kind of what we're eyeing. So, like I said, the purplish color is 7 to 10. Red is going to be your 9 to 12. So, once again, most of the 8 to 10 inches really looks to be in the heavier area, which of course that's on the lower end of the red scale, but it's still there. So that was forecast number two at 4:30 on Thursday. Forecast number three. This is kind of where our confidence started going up, unfortunately. You know, when for some reason went up to 10 to 14 inches across the area. This was whenever people started showing like 18 inches from broadcast side, and I'm like, no way. I just wish I would have stuck to my gut and kept it lower, but here we are. So 10 to 14 across most of the area. Southeast Kansas was down to 8 to 12. Most of Arkansas was also pushed down to 8 to 12. Um, you know, you can tell over here on this other one, the reds, your 10 to 14 inch. Of course, your purples, your other one. But you can kind of, I don't know, wasn't even really close. I mean, there's what, one, two, three, four, like four 10 to 12 inch reports in that. So technically, out of all that, that was the little bit that was correct in that sense. So yeah, four out of that entire area is not ideal, but like I said, the variance on the storm was all over the place, and it's really hard to get consensus of actually what happened with that data. So unfortunately, not the best event to learn from in terms of okay, this is exactly why it didn't do what here, because you look in the Rogers area and you have every type of report possible. So but yeah, that's really kind of what we're kind of looking at on the third forecast. So the fourth and quote unquote final, I say that because technically, if you go look on the social feed, I had 5 forecasts put out. However, the forecast that I put out Saturday morning was the same forecast I put out Friday night at 5:45. Exactly the same. The only thing I remembered was, or the only thing I removed was the higher chances for sleet and wintering mix in this area, which that was just more to focus it more on the actual snowfall than anything. But so that's literally the only change. So I didn't really feel like that was needed to have another slide of the exact same thing. So that is why if you look on the website, you'll see 5, but there's actually 4. So This one backed off the snow totals a little bit. Of course, this one really wasn't terrible either. I mean, we have three reports of 10 to 12 inches in the 10 to 14-inch range. Um, I think this was after the day that we started to kind of seeing the overall trend go south just a little bit. So that really started kind of tying in to what we were seeing in that sense. Um, but for the most part, I mean, we weren't terribly off on this one. I do like the other ones earlier a little bit better. We had a couple 8 to 10 inch reports. I say more than a couple. There's probably 10 there that are in the 9 to 12 inch range. So not too bad, but still kind of a miss, unfortunately. So, which forecast was the best from my standpoint? Looking at over it, I really think the very first one, Wednesday evening, was the best. Ah, it's quote unquote more verified. That's a weird term to use, but technically that's what we're doing here is verifying forecasts, and that was the one that verified more. Do I wish I really wish all of them were good. They were kind of all over the place. As I noted, the variance in the reports kind of affected it a little bit. And I'm one that doesn't like putting out bad stuff, whether that be weather stuff, literally anything. I want it to be the best possible thing it could be. Um, I guess perfectionist would be the right term. I don't know, but none of those were as good as I would like them to be. Um, I didn't do any statistical calculations on them to figure out, you know, how far off I actually was, etc., stuff like that. That's something that um, would have been iffy with the storm, noting how many, storm reports we had that were all over the place. So, in the future, if there's one that's more consistent, I will gladly do that. But in this one, we're not going to do that. So kind of what happened, which the archive data is very lacking in this. I wish I would have saved data as I worked through the forecast, but I didn't. Um, so the only data I really have to work with that was quote unquote before the event was the GFS on Friday at 18Z. So that would have been noonish, I believe. So one thing I want to kind of excuse me, one thing I kind of wanted to point out was, you know, overall in this thing, I really think models were overdoing the moisture that advanced northward. I really think it was a lot more limited than expected, and I'll kind of get into that here in a minute. Um, Snow ratios were also very complex. It wasn't like you could just use one number for the entire event. With the temperature profiles, amount of moisture, it really varied a lot more than I wish it would have, but we'll deal with that as it goes. Um, and we did have, some of that sleet down here in this area. I don't have my tools, but down in this area, had some heavy to moderate sleet at times. I know there's several reports across Berry and Stone County about it. And of course, further south you went, more ice and stuff you got. So, um, but kind of the biggest thing I want to talk about is kind of the moisture. So on the 18Z GFS that was ran on Friday, it showed Springfield getting zero point 0.8 of QPF, which is basically quantitative precipitation. I believe that's technically the proper term, but basically it's any liquid. So basically any liquid that fell, that's what QPF is. So if you melt ice, snow into it, you get water from that, that's your QPF. Um, so it showed Springfield getting zero point 0.8 inches of QPF. There were models like Thursday into Friday that were even pushing that over an inch of QPF, which was crazy. Earlier in the week, like Tuesday and Wednesday, honestly, were the best. They were like 0.5, 0.6, which, you know, this is the actual value of that. The QPF that Springfield had at the airport out there was 0.52. So that 0.5, 0.6 would have actually been really good. But the model started, trying to get into the moisture going too far north. that started to balloon snowfall totals and voila. So, math time. I'm going to try not to bore everyone with this. Of course, there's a lot of math and meteorology, so But like I said, QPF is liquid measurement of all precipitation, rain, ice, snow, etc. SLR, also known as snow to liquid ratio. That's kind of what we use to figure out how many inches of snow that you can get out of an inch of water. So, if, for example, if it was 12 to 1, you'd be getting 12 inches of snow per 1 inch of QPF. As I noted, GFS and Euro models did show a little bit lower of a QPF earlier in the week. But like I said, kind of started balloon that towards the end of the week, and that started resulting in forecasted higher snowfall totals. You can only win some apparently. But NWS at Springfield observed 6.7 inches of snow at 0.52 inches of QPF. For Friday, the 18C GFS mentioned 13.7 inches of snow at 0.8 QPF. So breaking down the snow liquid ratios for that, the observation side was 6.5 or 6.7 divided by that 0.52. That gave us a 12.885 snow to liquid ratio. So technically, over the event, it was trying to average out 12.8 average SLR. Or that's actually kind of what it did average out to be. GFS forecast or the model data was giving us 13.7 inches of snow for 0.8 inches of QPF. That gave us a 17 to 1 snow liquid ratio, which is, almost 4 inches more than kind of what we were expecting anyway. Looking percent airwise, the GFS was doubling the actual snowfall totals at on that exact one, so that did not verify very good. It had 104% of the entire snowfall total, so you want that number to be as close to zero as you can. QPF, it also 1.5 times the value of it. 54%. Of course, you want that to be closer to zero to be the right value, but 1.5 times the observation QPF. So there's a lot of math that goes into it, a lot of math trying to figure out these forecasts. So that's kind of, if you like numbers, that's kind of what happened in terms of a number sense. So what happened? Well, my forecasts were typically below what the models were outputting, still overshot it in most area. I don't put a whole lot of trust in models. I really don't. I try to use them as an example and then just kind of go from there. On most of it, most of the time my gut's telling me go under the models. That's what I did most of the event, but still really overdid it in some parts. I already mentioned the variance in the reports, so it's technically hard to say statistical margin of error in anything, but most of the forecasts were like 2 to 3 inches over, and towards the end of the event, that was trending even higher. So, da 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 da. I kind of mentioned it in a few things beforehand of the moist, warmer air and polar dry air kind of battling it out. That seemed to really start being an issue towards part of it, especially like Saturday evening, where we just kept getting more and more sleet reports. That's giving me that idea that that warmer, quote unquote, warmer air was trying to push in a little bit more. That's where we were getting our sleet instead of our snow. So, ideally, if that colder or if the warmer air would have stayed to the south, that would have technically gave us more snow, but you also lose some moisture in the same sense. So, yeah, that's that. How to improve? There's unfortunately not a whole lot. Do more analysis and trust the gut feeling. That's kind of exactly where I'm at. Yeah. I don't have any words on how to improve. That's just what it is. I hate winter weather. I hate trying to forecast winter weather. And this specific event was a little bit more than I would like to have to deal with, honestly. Getting closer to finishing a degree, but not quite there yet. But yeah, that was that one. This event was definitely starting to push not even my forecast, but even the nerve side of myself in terms of, you know, how it's going to pan out. So I mentioned the other day I'd do social media insights at some point. I'm just including this and this, so it's all at one time. Notes that Instagram is generally going to be lower. I don't get a whole lot of interactions on Instagram. Everything's most of the time cross-posted from Facebook over to Instagram, but we just don't get the amount of interaction. So I'm mainly going to focus on Facebook, but we almost had 70,000 views on Facebook. That's how many times someone looked at a post, or technically a post was displayed to them. We had 15.9 thousand different accounts that viewed content. So that's basically you just kind of break down, actually how many people were reached. That's 15.9 thousand. Just had a little bit over 1,000 interactions. That includes like, comments, and shares. Facebook page visits. We're almost up to 2,000, which kind of surprised me. Yeah, that's Instagram. We were at 6. That's, like I said, not a whole lot on Instagram. But Facebook, we did fairly good. I don't really exactly know why that is. A lot of people went to the page apparently to look for it, so that's a good thing. Facebook follows, we gained 97. In this specific time sense, it didn't give me how many people that I gained entirely, which that's supposed to be an equal sign, not a subtraction. Oh well. But so I don't know exactly how many new followers I got versus unfollowed. I believe there was like over 100 new followers, so clearly had some unfollowers, which it is what it is. But important thing is money from sponsors is zero. Um, I don't like blasting ads to everyone. Want my stuff to be easy to understand, easy to read. Of course, that comes at cost on my end of the cost for stuff, etc., stuff like that. I have to cover it straight out of my pocket rather than getting a check from a sponsor and having it covered that way. So, but I don't really feel like it's necessarily to have an ad and everything and constantly be powered by Tamco or whatever it is that whoever's sponsoring what. So yeah, that's that. Support WoolawayWx. That is kind of the end of the show, but I kind of want to. If you guys don't follow the page, please consider to do it. If you are also on Instagram, consider following on Instagram. All those can be found by searching WoolawayWx. That's WoolawayWx. Across those two platforms. There's also TikTok. Um, Most of the time, it's only short form content that goes on TikTok. So during events, it's not the most active, but it's there. The best thing you guys can do is interact with content, like, comment, share. Every time you guys do something like that, it helps Facebook say, okay, this page is good. Let's boost it up a little bit more. And that's not necessarily going to increase any money, but it's going to increase more people that are weather aware, and that's my end goal. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I haven't had a whole lot of interest in anything else. Um, Patreon, I tried to push it for 3 to 4 months, just didn't really get anything to bite. So we're doing away with that. So the best way to support WoolawayWx is, of course, follow on Instagram and Facebook and interact with content. But that is it. Hopefully, that helped you guys kind of have an understanding of kind of what all goes into a forecast, what went wrong, what went awry, how we can do better. Yeah, fun times. So, anyway, that's kind of what a post event forecast breakdown is for my end. Um, but yeah, so enjoy the video. If you guys liked it, make sure to hit like and subscribe. I have no idea how long this video is. It's got to be fairly long given the time. But yeah, we'll see you on the next one. Adios, guys.